A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Well, on Wednesday, we like to get our regular update about Israel and the Middle East, and we have the one and only Mandy Worby with us today. Mandy, always heaps going on in Israel. What is the latest?
One thing that is very consistent and has been actually for the last 20 years since Hamas took over in Gaza is the daily rocket fire. They've had spates where it's, tapered off for ceasefires, but that's not the case at the moment. Every day without fail, there is rocket fire. Mostly in the last few months, it's been coming from Hezbollah in Lebanon in the north. But yesterday, Israel was absolutely hit with a barrage of rockets, both from Hezbollah in the north, but also from Hamas in the Gaza Strip. So there was literally dozens and dozens of communities in the north of Israel that came under fire from Hezbollah terrorists. And the thing is, Israel wasn't fighting against Hezbollah. Israel was fighting against Hamas in Gaza. But when they started fighting with Hamas, Hezbollah jumped in to try to, have them divided on two fronts. It's been pretty savage.
Well, both groups are effectively funded by Iran, aren't they?
Oh, they're just proxies. It's all basically, same people, different badges is basically, and in different locations. Ian and I subscribe to the So Far Red Alert, and that tells us when there's rocket fire. So we were getting ready for bed last night and the alerts just started absolutely going off and they weren't stopping. So like I said, dozens of communities in the north were being hit by rocket fire. In fact, there was a Messianic community fellowship that was in Kiryat Shmona, which is right on the border of Lebanon. And that church or fellowship got a direct hit from a rocket, destroyed the church. It's a brand new church, just built. And that particular fellowship cooks literally hundreds of meals every single day for soldiers and for the local community who've been displaced. On the weekends, it's over 700 meals. Every day, it's about 400 meals. Had the rocket fire hit just an hour earlier, then their church fellowship, including their pastor and those working there, would have been killed.
Oh, man.
So they're saying it's a miracle that they're alive. I mean, they're going to rebuild, but all they really want to do now is find another kitchen where they can be constantly cooking meals for these people. But then there was also a massive rocket barrage that came in from Hamas in Rafah. In southern Gaza, the part where the whole world said, don't go into Rafah, don't go into Rafah. 3 battalions of Hamas remaining. They're in Rafah. And when Israel went into Rafah, they have found so many tunnels. The last time I checked, I think they said 700 entry points into the tunnels in Rafah alone. They've found 50 tunnels going under the border into Egypt. There's a lot of people asking the question, is this why Egypt didn't want Israel going into Rafah? Because they would have found all of these terror tunnels, which has been quite possibly allowing weapons to come into Gaza. And what's very concerning is whether or not senior Hamas leaders and hostages may have been smuggled out of Gaza. There's a great concern about that. But Israel has now identified them and they are going to destroy them. So those tunnels will be gone.
Okay.
But Hamas from Rafah actually lobbed so many rockets yesterday into Tel Aviv. This is into the central coastal region of Israel, all from southern Gaza. So that's very concerning, which means Hamas is still very active in Gaza and Israel cannot afford to leave them there, which is why they have to be in Rafah to finish the task of getting rid of the Hamas terrorists. So that's very, very concerning. But they're not going to stop. Israel won't stop until Hamas is gone.
Yeah. Well, it looks like this is probably going to give them good justification too for going in there. And what else is happening in Israel, Mandy? It's just like you said, there's so much going on in Israel and the Middle East right now.
It literally changes by the day. But just as from the IDF, as of Sunday that's just gone, 360 humanitarian aid trucks entered the Gaza Strip following security checks. Everything is checked. That includes 126 trucks from Egypt. So they've all been checked, so there's nothing nasty in them. The aid trucks contained food, water, fuel, medical equipment, medicine, equipment for shelters. All the humanitarian aid was transferred to Gaza through the personnel of the Ministry of Defence Land Crossings Authority. Can I just tell you, there is no shortage of aid or food in Gaza. In fact, there's probably more aid and more resource in Gaza than many countries who are doing it tough, especially those that are in North Africa and who are undergoing drought and the rest of it. Gaza has no shortage of aid and food.
Well, did you know, Mandy, there's 1.5 million people in Brazil who have had to flee their homes due to flooding and have probably lost their homes and all their possessions. 1.5
and
million
you know what's really
people.
sad is most of the world doesn't know anything about it, and nobody's saying there's a humanitarian crisis, let's get aid to them. It's the world is fixated on Israel and Gaza.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hezbollah and Hamas, again, firing rockets indiscriminately into population centres, and as such, they're not caring who they hit. And what's happened is that Hamas just fired indiscriminately. That struck an Arab town called Kalkilia, and it's in the region of Samaria. Again, they're even harming the people that they say is their own community. They don't care. The CIA. They have reported that Iran is trying to send suicide drones into Gaza. Hopefully now these efforts are going to fail, especially now that the tunnels under the Gaza-Egypt border are now known and they're being monitored and they're going to be demolishing them soon. Internally, there's a struggle over the judicial system. That's continued. Remember that just before October 7, the country was tearing itself apart in Israel over the judicial reform. Well, what happens is, as far as I understand it, there's a judge committee and it selects the Israel judges. So the judges are selecting their own judges, okay? But there are serious allegations of nepotism. Again, they're literally, the judges appoint their own judges. And this is why the nation was calling for judicial reform, to get rid of the cronyism. They're putting their mates on the bench. But because of these allegations of corruption, the committee has basically postponed or cancelled the meeting where they were going to appoint some more. Most of the sitting judges are on the political far left, and they're picking more judges just like them, which means they then go into the government when the government wants to pass legislation and they're undoing what the government is passing. And it's, you know, we know that government passes the law and the judges are supposed to interpret and enforce the law, but they're kind of taking matters into their own hands. There is a cause for concern in the Middle East as well, in that it seems that the United States is about to lift a ban against Saudi Arabia for the sale of offensive weapons to the Saudis. Now, they could just be trying to arm themselves to be able to defend themselves against the constant attacks from the Houthis in Yemen. More significantly, they want to be able to protect themselves against threats from Iran, because the Saudis have been talking of late with Iran and Syria. That's very concerning because, well, for obvious reasons, for terrorism. It seems that the Iranians actually consider the Saudis to be apostate. They actually would like to get a hold of Mecca and Medina because they're the holiest sites in Islam, and the Iranians consider themselves to be the purists, the Saudis not so much. So it's all very concerning. You know, it's all very, there's the balance of power there is very volatile. Yeah.
A lot of potential for conflict there.
Very much so.
And what about this international Court of Justice, which is almost like a something out of the novel 1984.
It is,
by George Orwell. I mean, and you fear for the souls of the men and the women involved in this so-called International Court of Justice. What's the latest on that? They're trying to issue arrest warrants for the Prime Minister of Israel.
Well, there's two organisations. You've got the ICC, which is the International Criminal Court, and the ICJ, which is the International Court of Justice in The Hague. They're both arms or divisions of the United Nations. Well, if they're part of the United Nations, you know that they're dodgy, all right, that they don't have great reputations. As far as the ICJ, you remember it was a few months ago that South Africa actually brought a case against Israel trying to claim that they were committing genocide. Completely, patently, demonstrably false. But the ICJ just gave a ruling that basically was saying that they wanted Israel to get out of Rafah, but the wording was very clever, because the wording actually said if there's a possibility of genocide. Well, there is no possibility of genocide because Israel is taking extreme measures to keep the population safe, and they're succeeding in that. The numbers that Hamas releases are total fabrications. So Israel is basically saying, sure, we're not going to commit genocide. We haven't, we're not going to, we're not budging, we're not leaving until we get rid of Hamas.
Yep.
And there was a lady whose name I can't remember, connected to the ICJ, has basically said, okay, we want to impose sanctions on Israel because they haven't got out of Gaza. Israel has not breached any laws or rules, and they haven't breached what the ICJ has said here either. But, you know, if they've got an opportunity to attack Israel, then they're going to try. Then there is the ICC, the International Criminal Court. They've been saying that they want to apply for arrest warrants against two of the leaders of Hamas and also against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defence Minister Gallant, which is like associating the terrorists with the leaders of a democratic nation defending their nation and basically equating them, which is obscene and unjust. The warrants that are being pursued, my understanding, they haven't been authorised yet. They're just pursuing them. I could be wrong on that, but the justice who is pushing that, his name is Karim Khan, and I believe he's from Lebanon. He's got a very anti-Semitic background, and he's saying, no, I'm not comparing the two, but just because you're a leader of a country, you can't commit war crimes. Well, the Israelis have not committed war crimes, not at all. But most chilling, because there's a lot Israel is not a member of the ICC, neither is America. Australia is, and most nations are. But what was most chilling at all was so many of these nations, including our own, have said, oh, well, if he comes here, they would be arrested because we have to obey the law. But that's what the Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz, said. Now, Germany has come out and said, we will stand with Israel. We know what genocide is. They're not committing genocide. But Olaf Scholz actually said, if the warrants are actually issued, yes, we will actually arrest them because we'll be obeying the law. And people are trying to remind the Germans, Hitler imposed over 400 laws against the Jewish population in Germany. And at the end of the war, when people were asked, why did you do this? They said, well, I was just obeying the law.
Wow.
So we are in very, very dangerous times. And I would just ask our family around the country, please be praying for Israel, her leaders, her government, the IDF, and all because of all the internal struggles they're having as well.
Mandy, as always, so passionate and so informative. Thank you so much, and looking forward to next week with another update from Israel and the Middle East.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.